here is all the tools that you're going to need for disassembly and reassembly of a tool module, including tools for stubborn tool modules that have stuck rule or just stuck dowel pins if it's got too much dirt in it. This is everything you're going to need. So a 5mm Allen key, 4mm Allen key, 3mm Allen key. I believe this is an 1/8 inch punch, 3/16 punch, a 10mm open-ended wrench, ball peen hammer, and a set of calipers. Basically the toolkit for taking apart one of these. So, the first step to disassembling any tool module is the first 4 bolts on the bottom of the female. They shouldn't be too tight, but I think sometimes they are. And this is using the 5mm Allen key. So 4 M6 bolts, and if the block is not stubborn, it will slide apart like so. If it is stubborn, you can use a hammer to separate these two pieces. So these dowel pins like to stick sometimes. If they do, that's where the 1/8 inch punch comes into play. You can just drive these pins out with your punch. If they get stuck on the other side, you can remove them after further disassembly of this block. We'll go ahead and do that. The first step to disassembling this upper half, there's these 2 lock nuts on this upper male hold retaining bar. So you pop those loose, and then your 4mm or 5mm Allen key, depending on what type of screws you have in this bar. It can be both. We'll set these screws loose. Set that aside. Now, when you're taking the male tools out, always put them back into their corresponding position on the female block. There can be, for the notches, there can be identical notches. As a rule of thumb, we like to have matched wear between the tools. So we want to keep any damage that is to this position matching to the same male tool. If you put different male tools in there, it can tend to damage the male tool also. So just one at a time, make sure you keep the corresponding positions together. And then these springs can come out. Now if this pin was being stubborn and stuck in here, this is when you can drive it through. This hole is a complete through hole. It will go all the way through the block, and you can drive those pins out. So here is a complete disassembled tool module. This is a great opportunity. This block is fairly clean, but here is a great opportunity to use the WD-40, which I failed to mention in the beginning, to clean up any dirt or debris inside of these positions. The tolerance between the male tool and this block is very tight. I would say within a 1/2 millimeter or so. So because it's so tight, the smallest speck of dirt getting in there can cause the male tool to get stuck. So make sure to thoroughly clean it out with WD-40 and then re-lubricate with any 3-in-1 oil or similar product. Wire brushes are great for cleaning out these slots also. I'm going to start on a dirty block if you're doing a cleaning process. I like to slide the male tools in without any springs in it and make sure that it slides completely free and does not get stuck on anything. If you feel any resistance, that means it needs more cleaning. Okay, those are all good. So I'm going to take them all back out one last time. And then throw the springs in there. I start from the left and work my way to the right. Putting the male tools back in, you want to make sure these springs are located in the upper tool holder. They have these special little slots that the springs are recessed into. You want to make sure those are seated as you're reassembling it. Okay, so when you're done, it should be all nice and flat. Then we can take this upper tool retaining bar and start to screw that back in. Now the added step is right here in the process. This bar determines how deep the male tools sit into this block. So the idea is, as we're tightening this down, we want to get the tips of these male tools to get as close to this surface as possible without protruding out of the surface. If you go too far, the rule won't feed into the block and you won't be able to cut anything with it, so that's not a good thing. I'm going to try to get this bar as flat as possible. Again, without having the other half of the male tool sticking out the other side. And then this is where your calipers come into play. I'm going to measure as close as I can get to the one screw hole, and I'm actually just going to zero out the calipers there, get to the next screw hole, and see what the difference is between the height on these two screws. If it's, I would say anything less than a millimeter is flat enough. That would be the tolerance. Anything less than a millimeter will get you a flat bar. Then the next step is locking down those lock nuts again. And then we can put that aside. We can bring our female back, and we take these two 5mm dowel pins and just locate those back in the female block, and then locate the upper assembly onto those pins. And then we can reinstall these 4M6 screws. Alright, that is the completed process. Sometimes when these pins are stubborn, they don't want to seat perfectly inside there. It's not absolutely critical, but it makes it easier to put this in the machine if these pins are not sticking out of the female block. So that's where this hammer comes into handy. Just make sure those pins are flush, and that is it.